You know that story of our ancient past we all learned? The one told through shattered pots and sharpened stones? Well, what if I told you a lot of it is wrong? Today, we're not just digging in the dirt anymore, we're decoding. We're piecing together a totally new history, following a trail of clues hidden deep inside our own DNA, in the chemicals of ancient bones, and even in the ghosts that echo in the words we speak every day.
All right, so here's how we're going to crack this case. We're going to follow the trail of evidence our scientific detectives have uncovered, from the genes of the very first farmers all the way to a catastrophic climate event that really changed everything. For the longest time, our picture of prehistoric life was, well, pretty straightforward, kind of like a simple linear march of progress. And that story was built entirely on the stuff our ancestors left behind, because it was the only evidence we had. But let's be honest, those silent objects can only tell you so much. Right, that's the million-dollar question. How do you rewrite a history for people who left no books, no words? Well, it turns out where the ancient voices are silent, modern science is starting to speak. Volumes. We have this incredible new toolkit now that works almost like a time machine, letting us ask much, much deeper questions about who these people really were and how they actually lived. Okay, so let's get to our first clue. The old story was that farming was just a really good idea that slowly spread across Europe. But the DNA evidence? Whoa. It tells a completely different and, frankly, a much more revolutionary story about one of history's biggest ever transformations. The absolute game changer here is ancient DNA. I mean, this is incredible stuff. Scientists can now carefully pull these tiny, fragile, degraded fragments of genetic code from human remains that are thousands of years old. And then they can sequence it, literally reading the biological blueprint of a person who lived an unimaginably long time ago.
Now, this is where it gets really wild. Scientists compared the DNA of a hunter-gatherer and a farmer who lived at the exact same time in ancient Sweden. The results were just stunning. Genetically, they were completely different groups of people. The hunter-gatherer's DNA is most similar to modern Northern Europeans, but the farmer? A super close match for modern Southern Europeans, especially Sardinians. So think about what that means. This wasn't just an idea spreading. It was a wave of new people physically migrating into Europe.
And you can still see the legacy of that migration today in our genes. Just look. Modern Sardinians carry a massive proportion of this farmer ancestry, almost 95%. But as you move north and east, towards Northwestern Europeans, and then over to Russians, that percentage drops way off. It's a genetic echo of that ancient wave, showing how those newcomers mixed with the local hunter-gatherers to create the populations we see in Europe today.
For our second clue, we're going to jump forward in time to the Iron Age and head out onto the vast Eurasian steppe. We're going to investigate the legendary Scythians. You know, they're always portrayed in ancient texts as these fierce, horse-riding nomads who lived entirely off their herds. But is that the whole story? The tool this time is something called isotopic analysis. Now, it sounds complicated, but the idea behind it is pretty simple. You are what you eat, literally. The chemical signatures from your food get locked into your bones and teeth as they grow. So by measuring elements like carbon and nitrogen, we can reconstruct what someone ate thousands of years ago. Your bones, it turns out, never forget. So remember that story about the Scythians being pure nomads? Well, when scientists looked at the chemical signatures in their bones, a totally different picture emerged. They found high values of a specific carbon isotope that points directly to a diet rich in millet, and that's a cultivated grain. This was not the diet of a pure nomad. This was the diet of someone who was part of a much bigger economy that included farming.
And that's the crucial point. Scythian society was so much more complex than that simple nomad label suggests. Their large settlements were probably these bustling hubs where herders and farmers mixed, creating this diverse and resilient economy that the old stories just completely missed.
Okay, now get ready for a really dramatic plot twist, because this clue isn't something humans made. It was a massive, natural event that just ripped through the ancient world and completely changed the course of human history.
About 8,200 years ago, evidence from deep inside ice cores and ancient geology shows that the northern hemisphere got slammed by a sudden and severe climate crisis. And I mean sudden. This wasn't a gradual cooling. This was a sharp, brutal shock to the entire system. And you can see the devastating human cost.
For thousands of years before this event, the climate had been pretty stable. Things were good. Then, at 8,200 years ago, wham! The event hits. And immediately after, archaeologists start finding these cultural gaps in the record. Settlements that had been lived in for generations are just suddenly abandoned. It's like whole communities vanished, leaving this haunting silence in the layers of dirt.
And this crisis hit different places in devastatingly different ways. The Near East, the cradle of farming, was plunged into a mega drought. Western and Central Europe got colder and wetter. The northern Mediterranean was battered by storms and erosion. This kind of pressure, it forces people to move. It probably created huge waves of migration, a massive disruption that just rippled across continents.
And that brings us to our final clue. And this one might be the most surprising of all. It's not buried in the ground. It's not encoded in our genes. It's actually hidden in plain sight, in the very languages we all speak today. Now, trying to connect an ancient pot to a specific ancient language, that's incredibly difficult. But just like a geneticist can trace DNA back through generations, a historical linguist can trace language families back through time. They can reconstruct their family tree and figure out where they most likely came from.
And the key insight here is simple. Languages travel with people. These huge language families, like the Indo-European family that English is part of, they don't just spread like a meme on the internet. For a language to take over a vast territory, it required the large-scale movement of the people who spoke it.
But why would local populations give up their own language for a new one? Well, the linguistic evidence points to some really powerful social and economic reasons. Maybe the newcomers had new technologies, like the domesticated horse. Maybe they offered protection, or trade, or a chance to move up in society. Adopting their language became a key to success. And that pattern, well, it corroborates the stories of migration we're seeing in the DNA perfectly.
So, let's bring all these clues together. We've got the DNA, the chemical fingerprints, the climate data, the echoes in our language. What does it all tell us? What's the new story of our past?
Well, that simple story of a straight, linear march of progress is gone. We can just throw it out. In its place is a history that's so much more dynamic and way more realistic. It's a tangled web of multiple migrations, of complex societies, and dramatic, unpredictable shocks from the natural world.
So what are the real engines of prehistoric change? It wasn't some slow, steady climb. Nope, it was a messy, complex, and absolutely fascinating process. It was about people moving and mixing. It was about creating complex economies. It was about climate disasters forcing people to adapt. And it was about social choices that led people to adopt new ways of life. This is how the modern world was really forged. And the amazing part is, this new picture is still just coming into focus. Every new bone that gets sequenced, every new soil core that gets analyzed, it adds another pixel to the image. Which really makes you wonder, right? If science has revealed this much in just the last few years, what other secrets are still out there just waiting to be uncovered? What are our ancestors going to tell us next?